They read my sister's name first, and everyone in that room smiled like the story was already over. Like I had already lost before it even began. My mother actually reached across the table and squeezed Olivia's hand, whispering, "This is what your grandmother wanted," loud enough for me to hear. My father didn't even look at me when the lawyer said, "All primary assets will be transferred to Olivia Carter." And I remember sitting there in that polished oak chair, in my uniform, after 10 years of service, realizing I had just been erased from my own family again. But I said nothing because they stopped listening too soon, and they never read the last page. Before I take you back to how that moment unfolded, if this story speaks to your heart, consider liking the video, subscribing, and sharing where you're watching from along with your local time. I always read those and it reminds me how far these stories travel. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 32 years old, a senior officer in the United States Army, and what happened that afternoon in my grandmother's living room was the moment everything in my family finally broke, and finally made sense. It started 3 days earlier on a gray Thursday morning, when I landed at Reagan National after a 9-month deployment overseas, still carrying the dust of a place my family had never once asked me about, my duffel bag slung over my shoulder, my phone lighting up with a single message from my mother. "Be at Grandma's house Sunday, 2 p.m. sharp. No, welcome home. No, we missed you." Just a time and a place, like I was being summoned, not invited. I didn't question it. I never did. That was the pattern in our family. Olivia asked, I followed. Olivia was celebrated, I was expected. Growing up in Northern Virginia, in a house that always smelled like polished wood and quiet judgment, there were two versions of what a daughter could be, and I learned early which one I wasn't. Olivia, my older sister by 3 years, was the one with perfect grades, perfect hair, perfect timing. She went to Georgetown, studied finance, wore heels to brunch, and somehow made it look effortless. My parents called her focused, driven, a natural leader. Me? I enlisted at 22. Not because I had no options, but because I needed to breathe. Somewhere that didn't feel like I was constantly being measured and found lacking. "The military?" my mother had said the night I told them, her fork pausing mid-air. "That's not exactly what we pictured for you." My father didn't even look up from his plate. "Well," he said, "someone has to take the hard path." It wasn't praise. It never was. And my grandmother, Eleanor Carter, was the only one who ever saw through that. She never compared us. Never asked why I wasn't more like Olivia. She'd just sit across from me at her small kitchen table, pouring coffee into those chipped white mugs she refused to replace, and say things like, "You notice things others don't, Emily. That's not weakness. That's power." I didn't fully understand what she meant. Not then. Maybe not even until the day we read her will. Sunday came faster than I expected. The house was already full when I arrived. Cars lining both sides of the street, voices spilling out from the open front door, the low hum of polite conversation layered over something sharper underneath. I stepped inside, boots quiet against the hardwood floor, and for a moment, no one noticed me. Olivia was standing near the fireplace, wearing a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my monthly paycheck, laughing softly as my aunt adjusted her sleeve. My mother stood beside her, one hand resting lightly on her shoulder like she was presenting something valuable. "Emily," someone finally said, and a few heads turned, just enough to acknowledge I existed. No one came over. No one hugged me. My father gave a short nod from across the room, like I was a colleague he barely recognized. I set my bag down by the door and took a seat near the back of the living room, next to a side table stacked with old photo albums. I didn't open them. I already knew which stories they told and which ones they left out. At exactly 2:07 p.m. the lawyer arrived. Gray suit, leather briefcase, the kind of calm presence that makes people sit a little straighter. Conversations faded. Chairs shifted. Everyone gathered closer, forming a loose semicircle around the coffee table where he placed his documents. I stayed where I was. I always did. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice even practiced. "We are here to review the final will and testament of Eleanor Margaret Carter." My grandmother's name hung in the air, heavier than anything else in that room. For a second I thought about the last time I saw her, the way she held my hand a little longer than usual, the way she looked at me like she was trying to say something without saying it out loud. Then the lawyer opened the folder, adjusted his glasses, and started reading. And everything began exactly the way my family expected it to. The lawyer did not rush. He turned each page slowly, like every word carried weight, like every sentence had already been decided long before any of us sat in that room. To my granddaughter Olivia Carter, he said, his tone steady. I leave the primary residence on Maplewood Drive, including all furnishings and associated assets. I heard my mother inhale sharply, the kind of breath people take when something finally goes their way. Olivia's fingers tightened around the edge of her chair, her lips pressing together in a smile she tried to hide but could not. In addition, the lawyer continued, all liquid accounts, investment portfolios, and business interests under Eleanor Carter's name will be transferred in full to Olivia Carter. There it was. Clean. Final. Exactly what everyone expected. I could feel the shift in the room without looking up. Shoulders relaxed. Eyes softened. Conversations that had been waiting quietly in people's throats began to rise again. Just beneath the surface. My aunt leaned toward my mother and whispered something that made them both nod, satisfied. My father sat back slightly, crossing one leg over the other, like a man whose plans had just been confirmed. No one looked at me. Not even once. I kept my hands folded in my lap, fingers still breathing slow. I had learned that a long time ago. When you are the one who is overlooked, you learn how to disappear without moving. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was how normal it felt. How familiar. Like I had been here before, just in different rooms at different ages. I was 10 the first time I understood what it meant to be second in my own family. It was Olivia's piano recital. She had been practicing for weeks. The same piece over and over until it echoed through every hallway in the house. The night of the performance, my parents sat in the front row, dressed like it was a formal event. I sat 3 rows back with my grandmother. When Olivia finished, everyone stood. Applause filled the room. My mother cried. My father shook hands with people I did not recognize. That is my daughter, he kept saying. Not daughters. Daughter. Later that night, at home, I showed them the certificate I had gotten that same day for a regional science competition. Second place. I remember holding it carefully, making sure it did not bend. My father glanced at it for less than a second. That is nice, Emily, he said, already turning back to Olivia. Did you see how everyone stood for you? He asked her. I lowered the certificate slowly and nodded, even though no one was looking at me. That was the moment I stopped expecting things to change. Back in the living room, the lawyer closed one section of the document and adjusted the papers neatly in front of him. There are also personal items designated to specific individuals, he added. A few smaller things were mentioned. Jewelry to an aunt. A watch to a cousin. My name did not come up. Not once. I watched Olivia lean back in her chair, finally letting herself relax, her posture shifting from anticipation to quiet victory. My mother reached for her hand again, this time not even pretending to hide it. I told you, she whispered. I heard it clearly. I always heard the things they thought I would not. Someone behind me said, it makes sense. Olivia was always closer to her. I almost smiled at that. Not because it was true, but because it was easy. Easy for them to believe. Easy to repeat. Easy to build a story where I was never really part of it to begin with. The lawyer paused for a moment, scanning the room briefly before looking back down at the document. That concludes the primary distribution of assets, he said. Chairs shifted again. A few people began to stand, thinking it was over. Thinking the story had reached its end. My father uncrossed his legs and leaned forward slightly, already preparing to move on, to close this chapter and step into the next one where everything remained exactly as it had always been. Olivia exhaled softly, the tension leaving her shoulders in a visible wave. My mother squeezed her hand one more time. No one noticed that the lawyer had not closed the folder. No one noticed that his fingers were still resting on a page they had not heard. I noticed. I always noticed. And I still said nothing. Because I remembered something my grandmother told me years ago, sitting at that same small kitchen table, her voice low, her eyes steady. The truth does not need to be loud, Emily. It just needs the right moment. The lawyer cleared his throat softly. Just enough to stop the movement in the room. Just enough to pull everyone back for one more second. There is, he said, An additional clause that must be read in full before this proceeding is concluded. The room stilled again, but not the same way as before. This time it was slower. Slightly irritated. Like people being asked to sit back down after they had already decided the meeting was over. My father frowned faintly. Olivia's smile did not disappear, but it tightened just a little. My mother glanced at the lawyer, confusion flickering across her face. I did not move. I did not speak. I just lifted my eyes for the first time since he started reading, and looked directly at the document in his hands, because I knew exactly what was on that last page. And they did not. The lawyer did not look up immediately after he spoke those words. He let them settle, let the room adjust, like he understood something no one else did yet. An additional clause? My father repeated, his voice carrying a hint of irritation, like this was an inconvenience, like whatever came next could not possibly matter. The lawyer gave a small nod, calm, unbothered. Yes, sir. Per the document, this clause must be read in full as part of the will. Olivia shifted slightly in her seat, crossing her legs, her expression still composed but no longer relaxed. My mother's hand slipped away from hers, not completely, just enough to create a small space that had not been there before. I watched it happen. Small things like that always said more than words. The lawyer turned the page carefully. I recognized the motion. I had seen it before years ago in a much quieter room with no one else around. My grandmother's kitchen. Late afternoon sunlight coming through the window, catching the dust in the air. She had a folder in front of her that day too. Not the same one, but the same kind of weight. You need to understand something, Emily, she had said, her voice steady, her hands resting on the table. People think inheritance is about money. It is not. It is about control. About who decides what happens next. I had frowned slightly, not fully following. But if Olivia gets everything, then she decides, right? My grandmother smiled then. Not warmly. Not coldly. Just knowingly. Only if everything is exactly what it looks like. Back in the living room, the lawyer began reading again. In accordance with the final wishes of Eleanor Margaret Carter, the following stipulation applies to all assets previously assigned. The words were formal, precise, but something underneath them shifted the air in the room. You could feel it. Not yet understood, but felt. My father leaned forward now, his brows drawing together. What stipulation? He asked, sharper this time. The lawyer did not answer him directly. He kept reading. All properties, accounts, and holdings transferred to Olivia Carter are to be held under a managed trust structure. Olivia blinked once slowly. My mother's posture straightened. A trust? She repeated, her voice quieter now. The lawyer nodded slightly as he continued. Said trust shall be administered and overseen by a designated trustee, whose authority supersedes all discretionary access to the assets listed above. The room went still again, but not in the same way as before. This time it was tighter, focused, like something invisible had just shifted direction. Olivia let out a small breath, almost a laugh. Okay, she said lightly. That is normal, right? For tax reasons or something. She looked at my father as she spoke, searching for confirmation. He did not answer immediately. His eyes were fixed on the lawyer now. Who is the trustee? He asked. The question landed heavier than anything else that had been said so far. The lawyer turned one more page. The last one. I could see the edge of it from where I sat. Cream-colored paper. Slightly thicker than the rest. My grandmother had always preferred things that lasted. The trustee designated for the Eleanor Carter estate, the lawyer said, his voice unchanged, is Emily Carter. No one reacted right away. It was not silence. Not exactly. It was something else. A pause where the room did not quite understand what it had just heard. My name did not belong in that sentence. Not to them. Not in that way. My mother was the first to speak, a soft, confused sound. What? Olivia turned toward me, her expression not angry, not yet, just blank. That does not make sense, she said, almost laughing again, but this time it did not reach her eyes. My father stood up slowly. Not abruptly. Controlled. But there was tension in the movement now. I think there has been a mistake, he said, his voice measured but tight underneath. The lawyer shook his head once. There is no mistake, sir. This clause is clearly outlined and legally binding. Emily Carter has full authority over the administration, distribution, and approval of all assets within the trust. My aunt, who had been leaning back comfortably just minutes ago, sat forward suddenly. So what does that mean exactly? She asked. The lawyer glanced briefly around the room before answering. It means that while Olivia Carter is the named beneficiary, she does not have unrestricted access to any of the assets. All decisions regarding property, funds, and transactions must be approved by the trustee. He paused slightly. By Emily Carter. This time the silence broke differently. Not soft. Not confused. Sharp. My mother turned fully toward me now, her eyes searching my face like she was seeing me for the first time, but not in a way that felt warm. Emily, she started, her voice uncertain. I met her gaze calmly. I had learned that too. You knew about this? Olivia asked, her voice lower now, more controlled, but there was something underneath it. Something cracking. I did not answer right away. I did not rush to explain. I did not try to fill the space. I simply sat there the same way I had been sitting since the reading began, my hands resting in my lap, my posture unchanged. And then for the first time that afternoon I spoke. I read the last page. I said it quietly, not to challenge them, not to prove anything, just as a fact. And somehow that made it worse. No one laughed this time. No one nodded. No one whispered. The room just tightened. You could feel it in the air like something invisible had shifted and no one knew where to stand anymore. Olivia stared at me like she was trying to figure out if I was joking, like maybe I would smile and say this was all some misunderstanding. I did not. My father took a step closer to the coffee table, his voice lower now, controlled in that way he used when he was trying not to lose authority. You read it? He asked. Not surprised. Not curious. Suspicious. I nodded once. Grandma showed it to me. I kept my tone even. Simple. The truth did not need decoration. My mother's hand moved to her chest, fingers pressing lightly against her collarbone like she needed something to steady herself. She never mentioned anything like this, she said quickly, almost defensively, like she was trying to rewrite the past in real time. I did not respond. I remembered that afternoon clearly. It had been almost a year ago. Early fall. The air just starting to cool. I had stopped by my grandmother's house on my way back to base, still in uniform, still carrying that same quiet exhaustion that came from living two lives that never quite fit together. She had been sitting at her kitchen table, a folder in front of her, the same way I had seen the lawyer hold it just minutes ago. Sit, she told me. Not a request. A decision. I sat. She slid the folder across the table but kept her hand on top of it. I am going to tell you something, she said, her eyes steady on mine, and I need you to listen without interrupting. I nodded. That was one thing the military had taught me well. She tapped the folder once. Your family believes Olivia is the future of this house. The business. The money. Everything. I said nothing. That was not new information. They believe you chose a different path, she continued. And because of that, they think you stepped away from all of this. She paused. But you did not step away, Emily. They pushed you out. The words landed quietly. Not dramatic. Just accurate. She lifted her hand from the folder. I built this family's foundation from nothing. Not your father. Not anyone else. Me. And I have watched how they treat the person who never asked for anything. I swallowed, but I did not speak. Money, she said, almost to herself, is easy to give. To the wrong person. Control is not. She finally pushed the folder toward me. Read the last page. Back in the living room, that memory settled over me like a second layer of air. I could still feel the texture of that paper under my fingers. The weight of what it meant even if I had not fully understood it at the time. Why would she do that? Olivia asked suddenly, her voice sharper now, the confusion starting to turn into something else. Why would she give me everything and then this? She gestured vaguely toward me, like she could not quite say it out loud. The lawyer answered before anyone else could. Because the structure ensures oversight, he said calmly. The trustee has the responsibility to act in the best interest of the estate as a whole. Olivia shook her head slightly. That does not make sense. I am the one who studied finance. I am the one who understands how this works. Her eyes flicked back to me. No offense. I almost smiled at that. It was automatic. Even now. Even here. None taken, I said quietly. My father exhaled slowly, running a hand along his jaw, his mind clearly moving through possibilities, trying to find a way to regain control of a situation that was no longer his to control. There must be conditions, he said finally, turning back to the lawyer. Limitations. This cannot be absolute. The lawyer nodded once. There are conditions, yes. The trustee is required to review all major financial decisions, approve disbursements, and ensure that the estate is maintained according to the original intent outlined in the will. He paused slightly. Failure to comply can result in revocation of beneficiary access. That was the moment it clicked for everyone. Not all at once, but close enough. My mother's posture changed first. Then my aunt's expression. Then Olivia's eyes, widening just enough to show the shift from confidence to realization. Olivia did not own anything. Not really. She had been given everything on paper. But she could not touch it without me. The room that had felt so certain just minutes ago now felt unsteady, like the floor itself had tilted slightly, and no one knew how to stand straight anymore. Olivia looked at me again, longer this time, really looking now, not past me, not through me, but at me. So what? Does that mean? She asked, her voice quieter now. I held her gaze for a moment before answering. It means, I said calmly, nothing moves without my approval. And I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. Because for the first time in my life they were all listening. No one argued with me right away. That was the strangest part. My father, who had spent his entire life correcting people, interrupting people, controlling every room he walked into, just stood there for a second too long without speaking. Olivia blinked, then straightened in her chair like she was trying to reset the moment, like if she held her posture long enough, things would go back to the way they were supposed to be. That is not how this works, she said finally, her voice tight but measured. I am the beneficiary. She emphasized the word like it should end the conversation. The lawyer did not react. He simply folded his hands together on the table. Yes, you are, he said. But the authority over the assets resides with the trustee. Olivia's jaw tightened. That is just a formality. It is not, the lawyer replied calmly. The trustee has full discretion to approve or deny access based on the conditions outlined in the will. My mother let out a small breath, almost a laugh, but there was no humor in it. This is ridiculous, she said, shaking her head slightly. Emily has been away for years. She does not even know how any of this works. I felt that one. Not because it hurt, but because it was familiar. That quiet dismissal. That assumption that absence meant ignorance. I kept my voice even. I know enough, I said. My father finally moved again, stepping closer, his presence filling the space like it always had. This is not about knowing enough, he said. This is about responsibility. This estate, this family requires experience. He looked directly at me now, his gaze sharper than before. You chose a different life. I met his eyes. I did. Then you stepped away from this one. I shook my head slightly. No. I was never given a place in it. That landed. Not loudly, but it landed. My mother looked down for a second, her lips pressing together. Olivia looked between us, her expression tightening again, like she did not want this to turn into something deeper, something she could not control. We are not doing this right now, she said quickly. This is a legal situation, not whatever this is. She gestured vaguely between me and our father. Exactly, my father said, seizing that angle. Which means we handle it logically. He turned back to the lawyer. What is required to transfer trustee authority? The question was immediate, direct, calculated. I almost smiled. There it was. Not acceptance. Not understanding. Strategy. The lawyer did not hesitate. The trustee designation is final unless voluntarily relinquished by the named individual, or legally challenged under specific circumstances. My father nodded slowly. And those circumstances? Proof of incapacity, misconduct, or violation of fiduciary duty, the lawyer replied. My father's gaze flicked back to me for just a second. Measuring. Calculating. I saw it happen. The shift from dismissal to evaluation. I was no longer invisible. I was a variable. Olivia leaned forward slightly. Okay, she said, her tone softer now, almost reasonable. Let us just think about this for a second. She looked at me directly. Emily, you have been gone for most of this. You have your career, your life. You do not need to be involved in all of this. She gestured lightly around the room, at the house, the people, the weight of everything tied to our last name. This is complicated. Takes time. Attention. It is not something you can just manage from a distance. I did not interrupt her. I let her finish. That was another thing I had learned. Let people reveal what they really meant. You are saying I should step aside, I said calmly. She hesitated for half a second. I am saying it might be better for everyone. There it was. Better for everyone. Not better for me. Not fair. Not right. Just convenient. My mother nodded quickly. She is right, she added. You have already built your own path, Emily. There is no need to complicate things. I looked at both of them, then at my father. He did not speak this time. He just watched me, waiting. For what, I was not sure. Maybe to see if I would do what I had always done. Step back. Stay quiet. Make it easier. I thought about my grandmother again. The way she had looked at me that afternoon. The way she had said, the right moment. I realized something then. This was not about money. It never had been. It was about the first time in my life where stepping back would not make things easier. It would just make everything exactly the same. I exhaled slowly. I am not stepping aside, I said. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just clear. Olivia's expression shifted instantly, the softness gone, replaced by something sharper. Emily, she started. I shook my head once. No, I said, still calm. You said this is a legal situation. You are right. I glanced briefly at the lawyer, then back at her. Legally, I am the trustee. The room held still again, but this time it was different. Not confusion. Not uncertainty. This time it was resistance. And for the first time I did not move around it. I let it sit there. Because I was not the one who had to adjust anymore. Olivia did not sit back this time. She leaned forward, both hands pressing against her knees, like she was trying to anchor herself to something stable. You are making this harder than it needs to be, she said, her voice lower now, controlled, but there was a strain underneath it that had not been there before. This is not about winning or losing. This is about what makes sense. I watched her carefully. She had always been good at that tone. Reasonable. Measured. The kind that made people believe she was right even before she finished speaking. It makes sense, she continued. For the person who actually understands these assets to manage them. That is all I am saying. I nodded slightly, not because I agreed, but because I understood exactly what she was doing. You mean you, I said. She hesitated for a fraction of a second. Yes, she said finally. My father stepped in before the silence could stretch too far. Emily, he said, softer now, almost patient, like he was explaining something obvious to someone who just needed to catch up. This is not personal. I almost laughed at that, but I did not. It has never been personal for you, I said quietly. That is the difference. He did not respond immediately. My mother did. We are trying to help you, she said quickly, her voice rising just enough to show the edge beneath it. This is a complicated legal and financial structure. You make a mistake, it affects everyone. I let that sit for a moment. Then I said, then it is a good thing I do not make decisions without thinking them through. That one landed differently. Not emotional. Not reactive. Just steady. My father exhaled slowly, his patience thinning now. This is not the military, he said. You cannot approach this like a chain of command. I tilted my head slightly. Actually, I said, that is exactly how I approach it. He frowned. I continued, still calm. There is structure. There are responsibilities. There are consequences for ignoring them. I paused just long enough. And there is accountability. The word hung there. Heavy. My aunt shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Someone behind me cleared their throat. The room was no longer on Olivia's side the way it had been at the beginning. It was divided now. Not openly. Not loudly. But enough. Olivia stood up then, slowly, smoothing the front of her dress like she needed to reset herself physically. Okay, she said, forcing a small smile that did not quite hold. Let us not turn this into something bigger than it is. She walked a few steps closer to me, stopping just short of where I sat. Close enough to make it feel like a conversation. Not close enough to feel like support. You have been gone for almost a year, she said, her voice softer again. You do not even know what has been happening here. I met her eyes. Then tell me, I said. That caught her off guard. Just slightly. She had expected resistance. Not an invitation. The market has shifted, she said quickly, regaining her footing. There are properties that need to be restructured, investments that need to be adjusted. I have been handling all of that. She gestured lightly, like she was outlining something obvious. I already have plans in place. I nodded once. Then you can present them, I said. And I will review them. That was when the room shifted again. Not physically, but emotionally. Olivia's expression changed, the patience gone now, replaced by something sharper, something closer to frustration. You do not review me, she said, her voice tightening. I am not your subordinate. I held her gaze. No, I said calmly. But you are not in control either. That was the first moment the tension broke through the surface. Not loud, not explosive, but undeniable. My mother stood up halfway then stopped, like she was not sure what she was stepping into. My father's jaw tightened again, his posture rigid now, the calm he had been holding on to starting to crack. This is not how this family operates, he said. I looked at him for a long second. Then I said, that is exactly why we are here. Silence. Not the uncertain kind. Not the confused kind. This one was clear. Direct. Unavoidable. I could feel it settling into every corner of that room, into every person who had spent years pretending this was not how things worked. Olivia looked at me like she was seeing something she had never needed to see before. Not a sister. Not competition. Something else. Something that did not fit into the role she had always assigned me. You think this changes anything? She asked quietly. I did not answer right away. I let the question sit between us, the weight of it filling the space. Then I said, it already has. And for the first time she did not have a response. No one moved for a few seconds after I said that. It was not dramatic. No one raised their voice. But something had shifted in a way that could not be undone. My father looked at me like he was trying to decide whether to push harder or pull back. He had spent his entire life pushing. It had always worked. Until now. Emily, he said finally, slower this time, more deliberate, like he was choosing each word carefully. You are interpreting this situation in a way that creates unnecessary tension. I did not interrupt him. This is still your family, he continued. We do not operate like adversaries. I held his gaze. Then why does it feel like I have always been treated like one? The question did not come out sharp. Came out steady. That made it harder to ignore. My mother shifted her weight, her hands clasping together in front of her like she was trying to hold the room together. That is not fair, she said quietly. We have always supported you. I nodded once. You supported the version of me that stayed quiet, I said. That is not the same thing. Olivia let out a short breath, turning slightly away before looking back at me. Again. This is exactly what I mean, she said. You are turning this into something emotional. I almost smiled. It has always been emotional, I said. You just never had to feel it. That landed harder than anything else I had said. Not because it was loud, but because it was true. The kind of truth that sits in a room and does not move. My aunt looked down at her hands. My mother's expression tightened. My father did not speak. Olivia crossed her arms, not defensively, but firmly, like she was drawing a line. Fine, she said. If you want to approach this like a system, then let us talk about it like a system. She straightened slightly, her voice regaining that controlled, professional tone she used in meetings. What exactly do you plan to do with this authority? I considered the question, not because I did not have an answer, but because I wanted to answer it the right way. The same thing any responsible trustee would do, I said. Review. Verify. Approve based on long-term stability, not short-term gain. She nodded slowly, but there was tension in the movement. So you are going to sit on everything? She asked. Delay decisions? Hold back assets? I shook my head slightly. No, I said. I am going to make sure nothing is rushed just because it is convenient. My father stepped in again, his patience thinning further. Convenient for who? He asked. I met his eyes. That is exactly what I intend to find out. Silence again. But this time it was sharper. Focused. Olivia took a step closer, her voice dropping lower. You think I would make decisions that are not in the best interest of this family? She asked. I did not answer immediately. I let the question sit there, the weight of it filling the space between us. Then I said, I think you have always been allowed to make decisions without being questioned. Her expression flickered. Just for a second. That was all it took. My mother stepped forward now, her voice softer, almost pleading. Emily, this does not have to be a conflict, she said. We can work through this together. I looked at her. Really looked at her. For the first time in a long time I did not see authority. I saw uncertainty. And something else. Something like realization. We can, I said. But it is not going to look the same as it used to. My father exhaled sharply, turning slightly away before looking back at the lawyer. What are the immediate implications? He asked. The lawyer adjusted his glasses. Effective immediately, all financial decisions regarding the estate require trustee approval, he said. This includes asset liquidation, property transactions, and access to major accounts. He paused briefly. Without that approval, transactions cannot proceed. My father nodded slowly, absorbing it. Calculating again. Olivia looked at him, then back at me. So what now? She asked. Not rhetorical this time. Real. I leaned back slightly in my chair. My posture relaxed but steady. Now, I said, we start with transparency. She frowned. What does that mean? I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. It means, I said, you show me everything. The words were simple, but they shifted the balance completely. Olivia blinked. Everything. I nodded. Accounts. Plans. Decisions you have already made or are planning to make. I paused just long enough. All of it. My father's jaw tightened again. That is not how this works, he said. I looked at him calmly. It is now. The room held that moment. No one interrupted. No one dismissed it. Because for the first time there was nothing they could say that would make it go away. Olivia stood there, her expression no longer controlled, no longer composed, just uncertain. And I realized something as I watched her. For years she had been prepared to inherit everything. But she had never been prepared to be questioned. And that was the part she did not know how to handle. Olivia did not answer me right away. She just stood there, her shoulders squared, her mind clearly moving faster than her words. For the first time in her life, she was not ahead of the situation. She was catching up to it. That is not realistic, she said finally, her voice tighter now. You are asking for months of work, years of records. I nodded slightly. Then you should already have them organized. That one hit. Not because it was aggressive, but because it was logical. My father stepped forward again, his tone sharper now, the patience gone. This is excessive, he said. There needs to be a reasonable boundary here. I looked at him. There is, I said. Full transparency. He exhaled through his nose, the kind of controlled frustration he used when something was slipping out of his hands. You are overstepping, he said. I held his gaze. I am fulfilling my role. The words were simple, but they carried more weight than anything else in the room. My mother looked between us, her voice softer now, almost uncertain. Emily, what exactly are you expecting to find? She asked. That was the first honest question anyone had asked. Not defensive. Not strategic. Just real. I did not answer immediately. I let the silence sit for a second. Then I said, I do not know yet. I paused. That is the point. Olivia shook her head slightly, a small disbelieving motion. You are implying there is something wrong, she said. I am saying I have never been allowed to see how anything works, I replied. So I am going to see it now. She took a breath. her control slipping just enough to show the frustration underneath. "I have been managing this for years," she said. "Grandma trusted me." I looked at her steadily. "Grandma trusted the structure," I said. That stopped her. Completely. Because she knew I was not guessing. I was repeating something. Something she had not heard. My father's eyes narrowed slightly. "What did she tell you?" he asked. I did not look away. "That money is easy to give to the wrong person," I said. "Control is not." The room went quiet again. Not confused this time. Not uncertain. This silence had weight. My mother sat down slowly, like her legs were no longer steady. My aunt glanced at her, then back at me, like she was trying to piece something together she had never considered before. Olivia's expression changed again, but this time it was different. Not defensive. Not confident. Calculating. "Okay," she said slowly. "If you want transparency, you will get it." She straightened, her tone shifting back into that controlled, professional cadence. "But understand something," she added, her eyes locking onto mine. "Once you see everything, you are part of it. You do not get to stand outside and judge anymore." I nodded once. "I never wanted to stand outside," I said. "I just was not invited in." That landed harder than anything else in the room. My father turned slightly away, his jaw tightening again. My mother looked down at her hands. Olivia held my gaze for a second longer, then looked away first. That was new. The lawyer cleared his throat quietly, bringing the room back to the present. "If I may," he said, his voice calm, steady as always. "The transition of trustee oversight typically begins with a full financial disclosure and scheduled review sessions." He glanced between us briefly. "I can assist in coordinating that process." My father nodded once, curt. "Do that," he said. Olivia did not respond. She just stood there, her posture still composed, but something underneath it had shifted. Something subtle but permanent. The certainty she had walked into the room with was gone, replaced by something else. Something closer to awareness. I leaned back slightly in my chair, my hands still resting calmly in my lap, my posture unchanged. But everything else had changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, just fundamentally. For years I had been the one sitting at the edge of every room, watching decisions happen without me, hearing outcomes that were already decided before I even arrived. I had learned to listen, to observe, to wait, and now for the first time they were the ones adjusting to me. Olivia turned back toward me one last time, her voice quieter now, more controlled again, but not as steady as before. "This is not over," she said. I nodded slightly. "No," I said. "It is just starting." And this time when the silence followed, it did not feel like something I was outside of. It felt like something I was holding in place. The house felt quieter after that day, not because people stopped talking, but because the way they spoke had changed. A few weeks later, I sat at the same kitchen table where my grandmother used to pour coffee, now covered in neatly organized folders, financial reports, and handwritten notes that Olivia had reluctantly shared. The process had not been easy. There were tense meetings, long silences, moments where old habits tried to resurface. My father still spoke like he expected to be obeyed. My mother still tried to smooth things over before they could be fully addressed. Olivia still moved like she was supposed to be in charge. But something was different now. Every decision paused. Every plan was questioned. Not aggressively. Not emotionally. Just clearly. And over time that changed everything. Not perfectly. Not completely. But enough. Olivia stopped assuming. My father started asking instead of declaring. My mother listened more than she spoke. And me? I stopped shrinking to make the room more comfortable. I realized something in those weeks that stayed with me long after the documents were reviewed and the accounts were balanced. Control is not about power over people. It is about responsibility for yourself. Boundaries are not rejection. They are clarity. And sometimes the most important shift in a family is not loud or dramatic. It is the moment someone quietly decides they will no longer be defined by the role they were given. If you are listening to this and you have ever felt overlooked, dismissed, or like you had to earn your place in your own family, I want you to know something. Your value does not come from being chosen last or first. It comes from knowing who you are. even when no one else acknowledges it yet. And you do not have to fight to be seen. Sometimes you just have to stop agreeing to be invisible. Thank you for staying with me through this story. Truly, wherever you are in the world, whatever time it is for you right now, I hope this reminded you that you are not alone in what you feel. If this story resonated with you, I would really love to hear your experience. When was the moment you realized you deserved more than how you were being treated? And if this story meant something to you, you can support it with a like or subscribe, but only if it truly speaks to your heart. My name is Emily Carter, I am 32 years old, and the lesson I want to leave with you is this. Never let anyone else define your worth when you have the power to claim it yourself.